Chair.
Thank you.
Teams is playing ball. Sorry, I'm a little bit late, Jodie.
That's okay. We'd only just started. Do we have any declarations of interest or anyone working under the party whip? Patrick.
Yes, Chair, just to repeat the declaration from the previous meeting that I have an affected interest as my wife is a teacher at a borough school.
Good on her. Thank you very much. Right, we'd like to confirm to the public that, do we have any public interaction, Esther?
No, we haven't received any requests for public participation.
Okay. Right. Then I would like to thank Lorraine and Seb for coming, and should we move on to agenda item 3? Right, Lorraine, would you like to present your slides?
Okay, do you want the whole deck of slides, or do you just want it from the point of view of what we do in the virtual school to support our CLA and the raising aspirations side of it?
Let's stick with the narrow version.
Okay, so
the specifics. Thank you.
Okay, I'll stick with I'll talk about the virtual school in terms of raising aspirations, because I think that's probably most pertinent. Esther, have you got the slide deck to share, or shall I share it?
If you give me a minute, I can share it. If not,
okay, and then I've got it to hand. So. Can everybody see that?
Yes.
Okay, I'll leave it on that because I'll jump to different slides and I can see where I'm going. So in terms of raising aspirations and widening participation specifically for our CLA, our Children Looked After, this year we've brought in Morrisby, which is exactly what it says on the screen there. It's a careers platform. And it's almost like a little mini psychometric assessment for our children. It's actually quite fun to do. It's not as intricate and probing as it might appear when you hear the word psychometric. And the answers are very simple. Questions and answers are very simple in terms of, do you like working outside? Do you like working with people? Do you like this? Do you like that? And then the answers to that are yes, a lot, a bit, and not at all. So it's very simple for our children to participate in, but the actual outcome of that report is really quite eye-opening in terms of strengths and weaknesses that children have, and then you build on the strengths, obviously, to identify areas in which they could work, and then it goes through even further to look at the types of jobs and then the qualifications associated with that. And the aspirational side of that is that you can say, well, if you get a level 1 qualification, these are the jobs that you can do, this is the money that you can earn, and then you can work up and say, but if you get a higher qualification, then you can do these jobs, and this is how much money you earn. And money, I always find, is the key with many of our young people. They want to earn as much as they possibly can. Obviously, within our PEP, which is our personal education plan, we do these termly. Every single child with who is CLA has a PEP. And within that, we have a careers tab. Schools are supposed to focus on they do focus on the Gatsby benchmarks. It's a part of their statutory careers guidance that they're supposed to offer in schools, and they do. Unfortunately, for some of our schools, they were tied in with Advisor. And I don't know how many of you are aware, but Advisor has since gone into administration. So there are a group of people, I believe, from Advisor who are banding together to set up another offer for our schools. And I think everybody is involved in that except Sandhurst. But that's something that our schools do. And what we offer for our CLA is on top of that. the 8 Gatsby benchmarks are there for you to see. In addition to that, if we have any CLA who are at risk of NEET or who have become NEET in years 12 and 13, then like every other child in Bracknell Forest, we would equally refer them to Elevate for additional careers advice and guidance. But I'll let Seb explain more about that in his slides. In addition to that, we are working with Champion Hire, which is one lady who set up a charity 3 years ago, to work with our CLA children in years 12 and 13 to kind of hold their hand a little bit more on the journey to university. And then also to continue to work with our care leavers and sort of be that person at the end of the telephone if there were any queries that they needed addressed. And yeah, she was very knowledgeable. She is very knowledgeable. She helps our young people in terms of finance, looking at different universities, looking at different courses, and so on and so forth. We have this year, for the first time, it was in September, we have been trying to establish a sort of alumni group for our former care leavers who have been through university. And we held a little group this year where we brought together some young people who are aspiring to go to university, so sort of year 10, year 11, together with some of our young people who are currently at university and who have finished a university course. So it was a really nice group of young people to sort of talk about the pitfalls and the pros of going to university as a child looked after / care leaver. So that's something that we're really building on. And like I say, that was the first time this year. Clifford Chance we've been working with. I've worked with them in the past, and since the pandemic's been over, we've managed to get back into Clifford Chance. For those of you that don't know, it's a huge multinational law firm based in London, very, very swish offices. And we take them in, they do a day with our children, they show them around the office, give them lunch, and they speak to various professionals in the offices who work there. So it gives them an idea of what they can do within the law firm. And also other jobs in huge companies such as that. You know, there's security, there's reception, there's secretarial jobs, there's all sorts of jobs available to our young people that they maybe wouldn't have considered. And if they haven't had that opportunity to go to work with mum or dad for the day or things like that, which so many of our other children have, then it gives them that opportunity. Study Hire is a partnership that we've started working with over the last couple of years. This is our second year now. We've had one very successful year last year, and we're heading that way again. I think the highlight of last year was a trip to Mercedes, where it would have been very rude for the children not to have got in one of the cars and go racing around the tracks as a test. They obviously weren't driving, but they were part of that and they thoroughly enjoyed it. But it was looking at everything that they could do in such a large company as Mercedes from a different perspective. And Elevate, Seb again can probably talk more about this than I can. We also have been working with John Lewis's since October 22. They approached us to develop this program, and year on year it's grown, and some of our young people have ended up having jobs as a result of the work experience and everything else that's going on. So this really is giving you an idea of how we raise aspirations and the work that we as a virtual school are doing specifically for our CLA. Obviously, it's something that runs through the core of our work, insofar as it's part of our remit in raising awareness of the needs of our children looked after, our previously looked after children, which includes those who have been adopted and also gone on to an SGO, which is a special guardianship order, or have a family arrangement. But from September this year, it's also meant that we have to raise that awareness of our kinship children. So kinship families are those where children have literally gone from the parents' home and not gone through the social care system for even one night, but they've gone straight on to being looked after by family members. And that's a large focus now, as I say, from September, that the government is focusing on to provide additional support for these families and children, because they don't get a foster care allowance. They don't get any of the special concessions that our children looked after and previously looked after children have. And this is something that's high on the agenda as a very vulnerable group who share exactly the same life experiences and adverse childhood experiences as our children looked after and previously looked after. So that's something else that's on our agenda, and it will all feed into, as Dwayne will confirm, our learning and improvement strategy that we're currently working on. So that's kind of the work that we're doing within the virtual school, and I'm not going to steal the thunder of Seb's Seb talking to you about Elevate and what they do, and then more about the data. So I'll leave that with Seb now. Unless there's any questions, of course.
I do have, sorry, losing my voice here. How do you assess NEET potential? How do you know that they're at risk of becoming NEET?
Okay, so from our perspective, we would know from a CLA perspective, because that particular young person maybe has had a difficult journey through education. They won't have achieved the qualifications. That we've had a few school refusers last year who ultimately ended up refusing going to exams. So we would know that they are not going to have the qualifications to be able to progress onto a college course or onto work. So we would have identified those young people, and we would have been working with those young people. Elevate will have been working with those. There's some other things that I've done. If you've looked through the slides this year, we've brought in tuition for our NEET CLA for post-16, so that we have the ability to help them to get a qualification in maths and English at a later stage. So we've got our English tutor, we've got our premises, we're just getting it up and running. And today I offered to a maths tutor who I'm hoping will accept, and I'll know on Monday. So we'll have that up and running, I'm hoping before Christmas, but we're more or less good to go. So there's a few things in addition that we're thinking about moving forward, but we identify predominantly by following our young people through the PEPs, and we can see if they've been moving around a lot. That lack of stability in placement and in school is a clear indicator that they are going to be struggling to access a college course or work. But there are very clear indicators that Seb will tell you about, which are the Ronnie.
Okay.
It's the risk of NEET indicators.
Right. One more question. You said that Sandhurst are not doing the PEP. Is there a reason for that, or is it because they joined the
No.
academy?
Every school has a statutory duty to provide careers education, information, advice and guidance. So it's actually CEIAG. However, Sandhurst didn't buy into, they all bought into Advisor, but I think Sandhurst was one school that had pulled out with Advisor before. So I don't think the advisors that were working with advisors that were working with Advisor, this gets very confusing, doesn't it? Had approached Sandhurst. They've come to us as Elevate to ask if we can provide some additional support to them on a sort of one-off basis this year, which we are looking to do. But the other schools, it's a statutory thing. Everybody is doing it, and everybody is providing very good advice and guidance to their children. It's statutory, and Ofsted would be all over them if they weren't. So
they're just not with this particular one. Okay. Thank you very much.
Yeah, although they will be doing it, but that wasn't done through Advisor.
Okay, yeah. Thank you.
I think Councillor Bernard's got his hand up as well.
Thank you. So quick question. I mean, lots of great interventions, you know, sort of light touch, more intensive. How do we go about enabling the our young people to actually engage with this? Because you know, particularly if you think about youngsters who've been school refusers or have had shall we say a troubled or traumatic history with social care and other agencies. You know, it's great having all of these, but how do we actually get those hardest to reach, hardest to engage, to actually engage with this? I mean, is this done in conjunction with a sort of an advocacy mentoring service type thing? I mean, is it sort of a wrap round process to actually get them to the point where actually this starts to drop into place and make sense?
My plan moving forward, I haven't got the funding to do a wraparound mentoring, but I do believe social care now do have mentoring. So if that is required, then that is something that we could go to social care and ask them to provide a mentor. What we are planning to do, we've been very careful in choosing our tutors. And the group sizes are going to be no more than 8. So, and there will be additional support in that room with our young people. From my perspective, it's all about the relationships. So it's slowly, we have to build those relationships with the tutors. First of all, when I think about tuition for our CLA, it's whoever we can get, and they may stick around for half a dozen sessions and then they might move on, or however it works with our young people. They don't actually have the opportunity to build that relationship and that trust with our tutors. So we will have the opportunity in the interim period between now, when we have our tutors, and the actual building being ready for us to use, for our tutors to go out and meet with our young people in the homes. We've already got the lists together of who is potentially going to be attending these sessions. So our tutors can go out and start to build those relationships with our young people and try to encourage them to come along and get those qualifications. Most of them are actually asking for it. Our post-16 cohort have already said yes please, and they will come. I think they've got to a point in year 11 where they've realized that, oh dear, I'm stuck up the river without a paddle now. So they've come back and they've said, yes, we want to do this. So they're on our waiting list. But like I say, for me, it's about that relationship, that consistency. It will be the same time with the same tutor in the same building every week. And that is what our children need. They need that stability, that consistency, and the tutors that are going to be the same will be there regardless.
Yeah, so effectively that's like that sort of contract between a young person and the tutor. I will help you, but you need to help me.
Yes.
So it's a shared bond, a shared experience. Thank you very much, Lorraine. That's really helpful. Really appreciate that. Thank you, Jodie.
All right, Seb, would you like to crack on?
Yep, absolutely. See if I'll share my screen. Is that all viewable for everyone? Perfect. So just a bit of kind of background regarding how the Elevate team came about. So I'm not sure if any of you were familiar with the Connection service that used to be around back in the 2000s, which was basically an entire service that would support with careers advice, but also other barriers to progression such as education, housing, health, relationship, drugs, etc. When that was then disbanded, and then the careers advice service became the responsibility of the schools for young children, and then the adult service was then created in terms of the National Careers Service, and then that's when Advisor popped up, which has now ceased to exist trading. But then the Bracknell Forest began in 2013 with the wave 2 of the City Deal funding that kind of created the Elevate, which was a part of Advisor and then was brought in-house in 2019. And that's how it's been ever since, with the Bracknell Forest Council funded service to provide the Elevate service. In terms of what Elevate do, essentially we try to improve the lives of the borough's most disadvantaged and vulnerable young people by providing careers education, which is the CIAG, the Careers Information Advice and Guidance, to kind of encourage self-belief, increase knowledge of the range of careers available, explore the alternative qualifications and progression routes. In terms of how we offer that, so we provide the careers information, advice, guidance and support for young people, whether they are looking into education, employment or training options. We primarily work with 16 to 18-year-olds. I know it says 13. We will work in schools as a sort of prevention to try to help those who have been identified as being at risk of NEET. And then we will work up to age 25 if the young person is a care leaver or if they have previously at any point had an educational healthcare plan. In terms of that support, so we will provide one-to-one careers advice sessions, both with the individuals themselves or with their family or parents if they want them in the sessions as well. We can help with looking for job vacancies, looking at college courses, apprenticeships, alternative pathways, preparing for interviews, basically all of that kind of support at a need basis. Within the Elevate team, there is 3 of us. We're all 3 careers advisors with level 6 qualifications in careers advice and development. We also have 2 other support staff to help us with our kind of data entry and general admin as well. In terms of the referral, all of this is on our website of the elevate.me.org, which is where either a professional can refer on a young person's basis, or a young person themselves or their family can refer if they're looking for support and help. In terms of kind of what the careers information and guidance that we can provide, so we've got the information, which kind of refers to just the factual, unbiased information of what there is there, but without kind of saying the pros and cons, just giving them the bare bones of this is what is available. Then we've got careers advice, which may be giving a bit more of what's the advantages and disadvantages of those options, how they can access and interpret the information, talk through it, give recommendations, and then the careers guidance, which gives a bit more in depth and can be over a series of sessions as well to really reflect, kind of almost teaching them, the young person, how they can investigate, how they can be motivated about their own career, and then finding them to do their own research that we can then talk through with them at a later date. Again, just kind of a general EAT in terms of education, employment, training, that they're in that, and then NEET is not in education, employment or training. There is a bit of a grey area of where somebody may be in employment, but they're not having any training or qualifications that, again, might classify them as not quite in EAT because they're not gaining the training, which is ideally where we would like them to be in employment as well. In terms of, alongside all of those, the Elevate also have the statutory reporting duty of the September Guarantee and the Annual Activity Survey. That's where, in the September Guarantee, we will be tracking all the young people in Year 11 and Year 12 to make sure that they all have an offer of education or apprenticeship or training for the next academic year. So making sure the Year 11s have an offer for Year 12 and the Year 12s have an offer for Year 13. And then the annual activity is to check later on in the year in January to see how many of them are still in a destination such as college, sixth form, apprenticeship, employment, how many basically took up their September Guarantee offer. These are statutory duties that we report to the DFE to provide all that information. And then every month as well, we have to track all 16 and 18-year-olds to submit those to the DFE, again, saying what destinations they currently are in the Bracknell Forest area. In terms of what we aren't able to support with is that we're not like a job agency. We will know about job vacancies and we will be in touch with the local area in terms of what we're there, but we're not a recruitment agency itself. So we will have links, but we're not an Indeed or a Reed or something of that nature. We do not offer kind of universal careers provision in schools in general. Obviously, with the advisor situation, things are a bit of a one-off at the moment, so we may help support where we can. But what we can offer is extra support for those targeted young children who do need it, who maybe have a significant identification of a risk of NEET, which I will show in the next slide. Like I said, we will work with people who often have significant barriers or to their progression in terms of continuing in post-16 education, but we'll also work alongside other agencies. Again, our focus is all on the information, advice and guidance that we can provide. Again, I'm not going to go through all of these, but just to give you kind of a snapshot of what the risk of NEET identicators are in terms of what we might look at. Again, this isn't a if somebody has one of these, they're absolutely going to be at risk or something, but it's something that we would work with schools to see who they may have identified as thinking, oh, we're worried that this person may not be able to have, may not move into a post-16 destination once they finish year 11, or even they may be identified at an early year. Again, we do work with young people from year 9, year 10 and year 11 before they get into post-16 as a kind of prevention to make sure that they never reach the stage of being NEET. With the three of us, we all work with the schools in Bracknell, all split up. So we each have familiarity with the schools that we work with and build up those relationships. And then, like I say, as Lorraine mentioned, we do work with the CLA as well. We've had working with the John Lewis Partnership to develop a job-ready program to get them experience. And we have had people who've gone for work experiences and then have job offers and have been working full-time there since. And we will offer any extra careers advice session to both children who are in the LA, but also potentially outside of the LA, but are reporting duties for. Again, we'll provide as much help as we are able to on a referral basis. We don't want to force them to meet us if they don't need to, but if they are of interest and people have identified them as needing that little bit of extra help, then we will do. But again, we don't want to be stepping on any toes because, again, when they are in school, it is a statutory duty that the school will be providing those as part of the Gatsby benchmarks. Another kind of support that we have offered is that we have used the Story Group to provide mentoring services as well, excuse me, to some of our harder to reach young people who are struggling with anxiety issues, struggling to leaving the house, where we've been able to give them up to 5 to 10 sessions of mentoring to help them gain a bit more confidence, get them a bit of experience in trades. Perhaps if they're interested in working in a gym, they can get some experience there, some childcare, those sorts of things to kind of get them a bit more motivated and a bit of help, which has then allowed them to then access our service afterwards, and which we found has worked really well. We've had about 100, I'm not sure, we've had over 100 over the last, maybe nearly 150 over the last 12 months using that program, which has been working really, really well. And yeah, and like I say, we have our referral form that anyone is able to get a hold of, so they can refer into us if they feel anybody is in need of our services. Are there any kind of questions over that information? I do have a couple more slides or information kind of going over some of the data if that is of interest, and I'm happy to talk through some of that from the last academic year and some of the information there. But I just want to see if anybody had any questions first.
Hi, Seb.
Hi.
Is it okay if I call you Seb?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you very much for that. You have highlighted a lot of challenges that we're looking at ourselves, so this is really good. I do have a couple of questions. It says that the to contact Elevate, there needs to be a referral. So who can be referred? Can anybody be referred?
Essentially anybody from anyone can be referred. In terms of who we can help ourselves, it would be anybody who's in year 9. So that would be 13, sorry, 13 up until 18 years old. Anybody can be referred at that point. If somebody is a care leaver and has left care, then they can be referred up to 25, as well as if the young person has an education and healthcare plan or previously had an education and healthcare plan, they can also be referred up to the age of 25.
Okay. It says under the support that you so you give out invitations for PEP. How many people come back and accept the PEP invitations? The post-18, sorry.
Oh, in terms of the post-18 support? We generally we don't get a huge amount of work with the over 18s, we find. I think because there's quite a lot of other alternative career support available, because we've got the National Careers Service, which is specialised more at the adult age group. We do get a few, but I wouldn't say we get a huge amount back with that.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
No problem.
It's good to hear about Story Group as well. I know a few people from there. They do good work.
Yeah.
Anybody got any questions before Seb moves on? Victoria.
Yes, please. So can I ask a question? You said there's NEAT, there's EAT, and there's the at risk of NEAT, and then you said a
Yes.
fourth one that wasn't on there. Could you expand on what that was? Because I think I didn't hear it quickly enough.
Sorry. So there was the at risk of NEAT, but there's the risk of NEAT indicators, which is the RONI. So in terms of the indicators to show, basically, if we're thinking what's likely to bring somebody to be at risk of NEAT, then those would be the indicators for it. But no, so it'd just be EAT, NEAT, and at risk of
But
NEAT.
you said about some that might be. So this is the problem. This is why I wanted clarification. You said something about there might be some that are in education, but they might.
Oh,
not.
sorry. So there may be a grey area where if,
Right, yeah.
for the purposes of kind of NEAT, when they say not in education, employment, and training, you can be working, let's say, a part-time job or working a job, but without any education or training or qualifications that you're working towards working alongside
So
that.
are you supposed to be?
Ideally, the
the
government would like, the government has with their EAT and NEAT strategy to have people gaining qualifications or training towards something up until the age of 18. So that's where there's a bit of a grey area where you're in employment, so you're not technically NEAT, but you wouldn't be maybe classified as EAT. It gets a bit more into the data about that, yeah.
No, that really makes sense. Thank you very much for clarifying that.
No problem. And usually with the education alongside it, they do look for, I think it's it's either 12 or 16 hours, which is where it can get a bit tricky for 16, 18-year-olds. And the biggest problem we're having is that it's very difficult for a 16 and 18-year-old to do a course just to do their GCSE and maths retakes, because the funding is only for a full-time course. So if somebody just missed out their maths and that's all they wanted to do for their first year, they normally would have to do a course alongside that to get that funding. Lorraine?
I think as well at this point, it's probably worth mentioning that risk of NEAT would be for your younger cohort. So you're up to the end of year 11. So if a child is in year 9, 10 or 11, they would never be classified as NEAT, even if they weren't going to school. They are classified as CME then, a child missing education. You cannot be classified as NEAT until you effectively hit year 12. So that's why we have that risk of NEAT as opposed to NEAT. So that refers to our young people leading up to the end of year 11. Then our NEATs are from year 12 upwards. So that's also a little bit of differentiation there as well in terms of making clear those terms.
Thank you, Lorraine. Moira?
Thank you. I just want to ask about child missing education. Can you tell me how that's managed? Because they will go on to fall into the NEAT category eventually, won't they? If nothing's done while they're in that position.
I can only speak from the perspective of CLA. So we very carefully work with our young people to try and find them the best provision. It can be sometimes quite difficult when our young people have EHCPs. And in actual fact, I was in a meeting earlier today with the DFE and other virtual school heads. And one of the things that our virtual school heads were saying was that actually an EHCP for our children looked after can be more of a problem than it is a help, because as soon as they're moved out of borough, you've got delays on consultation, the EHCP being transferred from one local authority to another, and it just exacerbates the situation yet further. So for us, we would always work with our children. We would have a package of support in place. SEND was also make sure there is a package of support in place if we have a young person missing education. And that would be the same with regards to all children with SEND. So if they are waiting for a school to be sourced or they are unable to access school, There's also the access to education. I nearly called it the old name then, Dwayne, sorry. There's also the access to education facility that we have now available. We've got the AI bots that will help all of our children to access education. So there's a lot going on within the local authority to support these children. So I don't know, Dwayne, if you want to add more to that, because it's a little bit more broader than just CLA.
Yeah, and to be honest, Councillor Gore, we've also got tracking systems now with the study bags, and I think, Lorraine, that's an important one to bring in. So all schools in Bracknell Forest now are signed up to study bags, and
Yep.
we can actually drill down now to an individual pupil level. So if we, the local authority has a duty to put in education if a child's been excluded, or if a child's unwell, or if a child, or for any other reason. So what we can see now through tracking the attendance data is any child that's been out to school either for 15 days or 15 days cumulatively. The children missing education sits within early help offer in Bracknell Forest. I've certainly managed the children missing education services in other local authorities. But again, with children that are electively home educated as well, there is tracking systems there in terms of making sure visits are done to the children as well. I mean, I don't want to speak too much about the CME here, Councillor Moore, because obviously it doesn't sit within my portfolio. And I know Audrey Johnson will probably have greater insight than me. But I do know, Lorraine, and the study bags has opened up a world of knowledge for us as a local authority now in terms of tracking our children.
Absolutely. And we're currently working with study bugs at the moment. I forget about that because it's been around for a couple of years now, which is because we're now on to phase 2, where we're actually rolling it to out of borough schools, and we're trying to get our out of borough schools on board with study bugs as well, so that we can track our SEND cohort who are in provisions outside of the borough, and also some of our SIN-CP, which was the main reason I bought study bugs in the first place, was so that we could actually monitor the attendance of our SIN-CP children. But then we recognised it was a much broader picture, and that we could have a council-wide support here on tracking attendance, which has been very well received, I think, today, and been very useful, as Dwayne said. So, yeah.
Thank you very much.
I was just going to add as well, alongside that, as part of the Elevate team, if a young person has been out and been missing school, and then they've missed their CIAG that the school would ordinarily offer, again, they'll be referred to us. We work with early help and get referrals from youth service as well for any young people who may be not getting that support. Then we will offer that one-to-one support, so they get that careers advice, so they can still look at what options are available to them, so they don't miss out.
Thank you. If there's no more questions, we'll move back to Seb.
Perfect. In terms of the data, just to try to figure out. So I've got one PowerPoint which kind of goes over the data over the last academic year, mainly from 2003 to 2024. I can give a quick look over that. Again, any questions, feel free to interrupt or ask, and I can clarify on any of it. But I don't want to go into much detail.
Thank you very much.
Is that the correct one, September guarantee?
Yep.
So as I was saying, so this is showing the data basically from 2017 all the way up to 2023 of the September guarantee, showing what percentage of our young people in terms of what offers were made to them, how it's broken up in from formal education and training to employment with no training, meaning that was falling into that grey area of where they're not getting the educational offer, if that makes sense. Then there's ones who may have no offer, but they are seeking employment and training. And then just for data purposes, because of the way that we track, sometimes it will be a case of the young person has moved away, but they didn't move away before our cohort was set, if that makes sense. So we were still responsible for kind of tracking them, but essentially they had essentially moved away, so we weren't responsible. That's basically what that percentages means there. It's just the way the data works. Just to give you kind of an idea, since it was kind of moved in-house, we got a lot more kind of general information in terms of who of information of what we were getting, and more details of that in terms of where they're all going. As you can see, there's usually consistency of, like, in the last 3 years of 97, 95 going into formal education and training, and of kind of the different offers that are being offered around the area of what we were getting with our young people. And then in terms of the participation data, so this is in terms of what the young person actually got into for the 16 and 17-year-olds from year 11 to year 12. This participation is only for the year 11, year 11 age going into year 12, I believe. And then, as you can see, so we've got a smaller percentage going into full-time education compared to the offers, because again, when they get an offer, they can get multiple offers at the same time. So they can get offers to multiple colleges, offers to apprenticeships, offers for work, employment, and total participation, education and training. And then again, activity not known to the LA at certain points. Unfortunately, with the tracking, we do find it can get quite difficult to track compared in year 12 compared to year 11, just because we have to, those relationships with the colleges are different from the schools. We're able to get more information from the schools, and then when they get into year 12 and then into year 13, they can be a bit harder to track with that. But in terms of, that's the kind of data of where they're going into, how it's broken up into what people are doing and what are the different areas within that. Just having a look. In terms of, this gives a nice kind of snapshot in terms of our NEET data and not known data, in terms of compared to the rest of the country and the Southeast. As you can see, in 2019, we weren't doing too great, but since then we have been improving. And in 2023, we had a much lower percentage compared to the rest of the country and the Southeast for both our NEETs and not knowns, which is really good. And in terms of our, just checking that one. Sorry, just trying to find the right data on each one. And then we also do the tracking of our young people with education and healthcare plans as well across the years. Those year 12, year 30, year 12, year 13, year 14, 15, and then 16 and above. Again, that can get a bit more trickier when tracking, simply because as soon as somebody with an education and healthcare plan goes into employment, their education and healthcare plan will then start to cease. And then as soon as they're ceased, we're no longer responsible or have the statutory to report them. So then we would no longer be reporting on them or holding on to their details. If that makes sense. I know that kind of is a bit of a quick snapshot on some of the data. Is there any specific questions that people wanted to ask or to look at that I can go into more detail with those?
How are we engaging with people once they do go into colleges?
In terms of for tracking them, or providing the Elevate service, sorry?
In tracking.
So we do have a data sharing agreement with colleges that we are able to. So Activate Learning, and with other local authorities, we have data sharing agreements so we can get information. So they will generally provide us with who they've given offers to and who have attendance and what their data. They will send data over who's been enrolled. For those that aren't in college, we get the census data from the schools from when they're in year 11, and then we would track via phone numbers, phone calling, emails, and texting to try to get hold of as much information as we can with them. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Do we have any other questions? No, doesn't sound like it. Okay, thank you very much, Seb.
Then we will move on to hearing from Duane, and thank you very much for stepping in for Roy. Really appreciate that.
Yes.
Sorry, Chair. I've got a question at this stage.
Yep.
Can we please schedule another meeting of this panel, please, when Roy's available? Because there's a distinct difference between the political leadership that the portfolio stroke cabinet stroke executive member takes and the operational role that Duane takes. And I think it's important that we have both perspectives.
Yeah, absolutely, Gareth. I'm going to pin him down.
Because it's not, I mean, having done the role, unfortunately, sometimes things like this are a significant priority. And I think, you know, we need to make sure we can work around Roy so he can actually attend and answer those questions. That's not to take away from anything you're going to say to us, but I do believe that the context, the roles and responsibilities are complementary.
Yes.
Okay, yeah, I am having updates with Roy as well, and hopefully you can attend the next one, which I think is in a couple of weeks, but I'll email you. Thank
Lovely.
you.
Thanks, Jodie.
Yes. So I'm aware that I'm here. I'm just going to talk about transitions in terms of broadly. And I just want to thank Lorraine and Seb for sort of delivering on the needs, which is part of my portfolio as well. So at the moment, if I talk broadly, we are working now with our early years settings. I do have a little presentation here. I can share from, if I can get this up. So in terms, can you see everybody? Yeah.
Yeah, looks good. Thank you.
Yeah. So in terms of the early years, what we've got is a transition documents for families have been set up. And this has been done with the standards and early year practitioners from all sectors. Schools start making contacts with families now. So parents are applying for schools, and once we know where the child is placed, schools will make contact. Any child that's open to the Child Development Centre, there will be a range of activities in terms of our early years. There'll be moving on groups at the CDC team around the child meetings, and if necessary, transfer to the autism service for children and young people, or for our babies then that require that service. There are children who are supported through the 5 to Thrive approach. And again, what is provided for the transition for that is one-page profile. I do want to talk a bit more, if I can stop sharing a minute, about the process now that children and young people with education, health and care plans are going through, which is slightly different to those children that apply for schools through the normal admission routes. So if our children or our babies coming into the system, or any child that's transferring between year 6 and 7. So at the moment, we have now opened all the plans for the children because they will have to have the setting named. So we don't go through admissions for this. The process for transfer into the system, into the educational system and into year 7 is undertaken by consultation. It's a 15-day consultation with schools. So at this point, we go out and ask the parents for their preference of school. It doesn't mean that every parent that expresses a preference gets the school of their choice. But what we tend to do is go out to consultation with the school, particularly year 7s into year 7s, and ask if they can actually meet this child's needs. So that is a statutory process, and obviously we don't go outside of that. We're not allowed to for children with plans. The statutory time frame for that is the 15th of February. So all children with education, health and care plans should know on that day what school they go into or what type of school they are going to in terms of Section I of their education, health and care plan. So we have started that phased transfer process, and as I said, the year 6 cohort, all their plans now are open to amendment and they will be issued in February. In terms of transitions for our year 11 children, young people, And if I talk about those transitions for children with plans, we have a statutory time frame of March the 31st. So as soon as we start sort of naming in the children's plans, what schools they go into for year 7, we also, in the back scene of that, are also working on then the transfers for the year 11 cohort. And as I said to you, the statutory time frame for that is the 31st of March. So about Christmas time, we start opening up them plans and start consulting with, talking to the young people and their families for a preference of school. We start consulting with the schools. And again, as in line with the year 6s into 7, we will name them plans by the 31st of March. What we've got then in terms of admissions for children coming into the system is that we have the April time in which all families, they put 3 choices down in terms of preference for schools. You have your first choice, your second and your third choice. And then the parents then are informed then what school the children can go to. And that is usually around, if I have this correct, that's usually around the 18th of April time, where all families then are transitioning there. There is another cohort as well where we look at, and that is our post-19 learners. And looking at the post-19 learners, in particular those with education, health and care plans, then we have a look at whether their outcomes have been met in terms of their educational outcomes. We also look at whether, we need to continue with the education, health and care plan. So for young people, some young people with education, health and care plans, they go on to university. When you go to university, then the plan ceases. So you don't carry that plan forward with you. Similarly, if you go into employment, the plan ceases. It's slightly different if you go into supported internships. The plan can remain in terms of supported internships, but as soon as that turns into a permanent post, then the plan then ceases. So it's a statutory process again that we go through for the post-19 to 25 learners. And we will work with our social care colleagues as well, because for some young people, education might not be no longer appropriate. For others, it absolutely is. And again, we will consult with the young person in terms of what their wishes are, in terms of whether they want to continue into education. So that's a broad sweep, really, of our transition between the key stages. Is there anything else anybody wants to ask me about transitions? Councillor Smith.
Thanks, Dwayne. I was just interested in you were talking about how the plans are sort of closed when a young person moves into employment or they move into higher education. I was just what happens with those young people who attempt that move but it doesn't work? Are they then lost to the system at that point, or is there a way sort of back on where we re-engage a plan or something to support a young person in that position?
So, I mean, that's a good question, actually, Councillor Smith. It's not something I've faced, to be honest with you. So if you've got a plan and the child usually goes to university, it would cease the plan. You would reapply, you would have to reapply for an education, health and care plan. But in saying that, to reapply, you must be in education. So, it could be that learner goes back into college. But I suppose if that learner has got A-levels, which would probably be the qualifying entry into higher education, then going back into college, then you could argue that they've achieved their outcomes in terms of getting the A-levels. So we wouldn't normally have a plan in place if the plan wasn't progressing. Does that make sense to you? So if you've got A-levels and you want to do a BTEC course, which is perhaps a lower level course, then you would say that isn't progression, and it's not progressing. In my time being in this world, I don't think I've ever had a case with a young person has come out of university and then gone back into further education, haven't been in higher education. And Councillor Smith, that might happen, and I'll let you know when it does, but it's not happened thus far. So yes, they would have to reapply for a needs assessment, they would.
I guess what about the situation with employment? Because that that may be more likely to be, you know, if a young person finishes education, they find an opportunity for employment that perhaps after a month or two is not working out for them, and they might actually still need the support that if they'd not had that employment, they would continue sort of in the system, wouldn't they? And I'm just worried, are we losing sight of some of these young people that, you know, because they're initially seeming to achieve what we're hoping they'll achieve, but we're not sort of following them down the line with that? Are they falling off the radar is the concern?
Yeah, we do ask for destination data, Councillor Smith. So, you know, our schools, I've been interviewing this week, and one of my questions was, do you track the destination of your school leavers? And lots of schools do. And as Lorraine just said, she's looking to set up alumni groups and what have you. If you're in employment, your plan has ceased. Then again, if you're going back into education, and whether that's progressive education, then you would have to reapply for needs assessment. Yeah.
Okay.
Councillor Barnard.
So, hang on. Sorry about that. So I'm interested in the placement progression, because there's an element of subjectivity around this, because my gut feeling is that a young person might be succeeding in one particular course, but that setting has identified that actually their skills are not being used to their best, and then might suggest, well, let's move to another course. Now, the difficulty there is you need a good consistency of support and work on that. And if, you know, you have a change of workers mid that, you know, what's the level of understanding? And secondly, how do we define progression? Does that sit in the hands of an educationalist? Do you know what I mean? Because, you know, I would, you know, in a simplistic way, if I'm going from sort of, and I'm going to use the word O levels, when I went from O levels to A levels and to university, ... that was a very clear academic progression. We'll leave the grades to one side, but that was a clear academic progression. It's possibly less so if you have something that has more applied element, and you know, might then sort of, for example, something like hospitality or you know, event management or something like that, where actually, you know, you can only find out what the skill set is, presumably, once someone's established in the course. So I'm interested because I think in Bracknell Forest we've had a couple of cases, haven't we, where we've sort of recently had to kind of understand and think, well, what does progression really look like, and who's making that decision? But
yeah, and it is difficult, Councillor
Barnard. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and it is difficult, and you know, certainly, I mean, if I can give you some examples, you know, where, you know, we do have some learners with education, health and care plans that have left school with GCSEs, and their cognitive functions are in regression. So, you know, they've left school with GCSEs, maybe A levels, but they barely, you know, do an ASDAN course now, and therefore you would argue that's regression, because they've obviously got going back cognitively. I mean, you know, when we talk about progression, we do talk about educationally moving on to the next tier, don't we, of learning. Changing course is something different, Councillor Barnard, and youngsters, you know, I certainly know youngsters do have taster days at college, and have access to taster days around what courses they want to do, a bit like if you're doing a GCSEs, a bit like if you're doing, you know, functional skills and what have you. So, you know, it varies, and when we talk about health education, it's such a wide scope of,
see, that's my concern, that it is such a wide scope that if it's not a sort of an academic or a vocationally measured qualification against the benchmark, but actually might exploit a different level of skill usage, that's where I think you know that subjectivity comes in. And I think in particular, if you're working with youngsters who are on the autistic scale or, you know, spectrum, or have other learning difficulties associated, that uncertainty can cause you know measure regression. So I think what I'm coming to is, you know, I suspect from a parent's perspective and a carer's perspective, Jodie, something we might want to pull out of this is, how do we describe, Dwayne, just what you've been describing, which is what we actually mean by progression? because I think there's some easy ones. I think there's some easy ones, but there are also some more complex situations. And, you know, it might be useful to share with providers. So when assessing whether something has an element of progression or not, it becomes more objective and less subjective. It's just a thought. I mean, you know, I don't know.
I mean, you know, Councillor Barnett, is something I'm looking into in terms of availability of courses and looking at what level courses we've got. So, you know, if your cognitive ability is such that you can get your A-levels, then that's a clear progression on from your GCSEs, isn't it? That's a step upwards. You know, certainly, you know, when I went to university, I studied, you know, I didn't do the A-levels, I did a HND, which was equivalent to 4 A-levels. So, but you know, on the points score academically, that was exactly the same, and give me the entrance I needed to go into university. For some of our learners, university will never be an option. Does that make sense to you?
Totally.
And if you're talking of a young person with profound and multiple learning difficulties, but then progression for them could be them, you know, using eye gaze and communicating through eye gaze. So it's, you know, and, you know, for me, it's about the outcomes in the plan when you're talking about that. In terms of courses, as I said to you, you know, we all go on courses some of us don't like, and we change our way off. And we do that with our careers, don't we? We do one thing, we want to be one thing, and we change. You know, colleges work with youngsters to make sure that they do actually get the suitable course. I think for me, what we've got to look at is availability of level 1 courses, level 2 courses, and level 3.
Yeah, that sort of entry level, that sort of foundation level almost, to then access and move up.
Yeah, and what we want to be able to do, and I think the fundamental thing for me, and I'm a maths teacher, as colleagues don't know, but it's just getting them basic for some of our cohorts, and especially for those that can fall into our NEET section, is around maths and English. We need to raise just the core skills and you know, I mean, if you've got to go into apprenticeship, you need maths and English, so it's fundamental to opening lots of doors. But you know, there are different ways of accessing education, and for a parent that has a child with multiple and profound learning difficulty, making eye contact can be progression. So I don't want to say that having an A-level is the only route, or having GCSEs. There's lots of different routes. And
for those of us, some of us had to matriculate before we could go to university, but that's an expression from the past as well. So thank you, Jodie.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Dwayne.
Thank you.
So last time we had a meeting, so Jenny was going to go and ask some questions of Ranelagh, and Gareth has offered to ask the same questions of Garth. Esther, would you mind sketching out some questions that we can agree on, please? And do we have any more questions for anybody? Ooh, silence. Okay. Right. Thank you very much, everybody. I declare this meeting closed.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dwayne.
Thank you. If there is any information that anybody needs